early.
How you doing, Taylor?
Good, yourself?
No, not bad. Not bad. Can't complain.
Good. Good.
How about you, Blair? How you doing?
I'm doing really good.
Good.
You all studied up?
Guess we'll find out.
I just sent you an email, Gary, just so that you're aware.
Okay. Hey, Kim, is that for the public comment period or the public hearing?
Did not specify.
Okay. Hello, Wes.
I'm here. How's the volume?
It's good. Hello, Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hello, Julie. Julie.
Can you hear us, Julie? Julie, give us a thumbs up if you can hear me.
Nope. That's no fair. She's putting a background behind her.
You're muted, Julie.
Jeremy, can you hear us? Well, that's no good.
Julie, I owe you some answers to questions. I'm almost done with them, and I'll send them out to everybody when I'm finished.
Sherry, I don't think Julie can hear us yet.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Jeremy, are you on? Well, technically, we have a quorum still if only 3 people can hear, right?
Yeah, I was wondering that same thing. We have a quorum if only 3 of us can participate, even though they're still here.
You do. 3 is a quorum.
3's a quorum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is 6 o'clock, but let's give it another minute or so. Well, there's Jeremy. Jeremy, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent.
See, it looks like Julie. Oh, there she is. Julie, can you hear us now?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can't hear anybody.
We can hear you. Turn your volume up a bit.
Julie, can you hear us now? Hey, Kim, should we have her jump off and try to jump back on one more time? Or
Yeah, we can hear her. Maybe she just doesn't have her volume up high enough to hear us.
I think she does. Yeah, she says the volume is up and nothing muted. So
Huh. Maybe have her try to restart her computer. Try again. If not, she can listen through the YouTube if she wants to. That way she can hear us and she can talk normally.
Or she could call in with her phone as well.
That's true.
She doesn't have to.
Didn't even think about that. Yep, she could call in on her phone.
That's probably better. The YouTube lags behind too far.
yeah, it does. Well, for those who are watching on YouTube, we are experiencing just a little difficulty, so we will start here in just a minute. Try to get Commissioner Losi so she can hear. So we've actually had a pretty good run with these virtual meetings. And now what looks like will be our last one. We're having the difficulties. Kim, are we okay to give her another minute or so? Then we can get going. I know we got to be done by 8.
Yeah, I think we're okay. Give her just another minute or so and then we can get going and she can, if nothing else, she can call in at least she'll be able to hear us that way.
Okay.
I know for me, my internet has been really spotty here lately, so my video will drop in and out, and I've just been utilizing the call-in feature. So hopefully you guys can still hear me because I think I just dropped off.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
But you're sideways, Taylor. That's a pretty cool trick.
I was gonna say something.
Everybody just turn this way when Taylor's talking.
That's right. There you go. Y'all seen that movie Arrival when they go anti-gravity and they're walking sideways?
Hey, there's nothing that says I can't be upside down in these meetings.
You were upside down earlier.
Was I? Oh, I'll be so excited to get back to the city council or the city hall.
Oh. Julie, can you hear us?
Yep.
Julie, are you there? Julie, give us a thumbs up if you can hear us. All right.
Finally. I don't know what's going on with my computer, so
Voice
we'll try it on the phone.
All right. Well, we are 6 minutes late. Apologize for that, but we wanted to make sure we had all commissioners, not just here, but able to hear and be heard. So everyone, thank you for your patience. Why don't we go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Davis, you are on for that today.
Excellent. All right, repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Let me read the public meeting, the electronic meeting declaration here. I, Gary Boatwright Jr., as the chair of the South Weaver City Planning Commission, do hereby find and declare as follows. Due to the emergency conditions which currently exist in the state of Utah and specifically in Davis County and South Weaver City as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent surge in COVID-19 infections across the state and in Davis County, the holding of public meetings with an anchor location as defined in Utah Open and Public Meetings Act presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. And the risk of those who may be present at an anchor location can be substantially mitigated by holding public meetings of the Planning Commission pursuant to electronic means that allow for public participation via virtual means, and the city has the means and ability to allow virtual participation in the public meetings in accordance with the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. Now therefore, based upon the foregoing, for 30 days from the date of this order, meetings of the South Weaver City Planning Commission shall be conducted by virtual means without an anchor location dated this first day of April 2021. And hopefully that will be the last time we have to read one of those. So let's move on to public comments. Kim, were we able to check if he wanted to do it now or if it was part of the public hearing?
He is not online currently.
He is not on. Okay, so we'll see if he jumps on for the public hearing. So there was an email sent by Mr. Terry George. Hopefully you all got that. And I believe he's the one person who signed up for today as well. So now let's move on to approval of the consent agenda items. Did everyone have a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting?
Did indeed.
Any questions, concerns?
None for me.
Okay, if not, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion to. Go ahead, Wes.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda for Planning Commission 2021-03-18 and the minutes.
Second, anyone?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 And that was unanimous. I stand approved. Okay, now public hearing and action on preliminary final plat, Public Works subdivision, and also amending Smith and Edward subdivision located at approximately 128 East South Weaver Drive. And this was continued from our March 18th, 2021 meeting. Is it Sherry or Brandon, you leading off on this? Let's hear from you first, then we'll open the public hearing.
I'm going to defer to Brandon on it.
Okay, I'm happy to take it. The plat that you received in your packet shows what we discussed last time, that the entrance off of South Weaver Drive was modified slightly, and that's the only change. In the memo that I submitted, I included an update to cover the need for this change. You'll also notice that in the packet there was a property exchange agreement that was included just for your reference to see what the arrangements are for acquiring a little bit more property from the Rays adjacent to the Elite Training Center property. That's necessary to get this access point where UDOT would like us to have it.
Hey, Brandon, I had a quick
Brandon,
question.
I've got a.
Oh,
go ahead.
My only question about that plot was that access road to make sure that it seems like the change you made was all about making sure that that entrance and exit from that point was set up in a way where there wasn't so much blindness coming in and out of that. Is that why we widened that entrance onto South Weaver?
Part of it is, yes, but it's also to allow for turning radius of large vehicles coming into the access road. We just want to make sure that we have enough property to be able to accommodate that in the future. Of course, the final design of that is down the road sometime, but we just wanted to make sure we got enough property to accommodate that.
Yeah, perfect. That was my only question. Thank you.
Brandon, have we, what's the slope going to be on that road?
Hold on for 1 second. Should we open the public hearing first?
No.
Okay.
Just by way of process, no, because the commission doesn't discuss during the public hearing. That's strictly to receive public comment.
Well,
you can frequently
well, I
what'll
mean,
happen.
oh, sorry, I mean, should we open the public hearing before our discussion? I mean, open and close it before our
Oh,
discussion,
yeah.
then have the discussion. So,
Yeah, that's probably a better course of action to do.
okay. Kim, do we have anybody waiting?
We do not.
Okay, but we probably still should open and probably still should close.
Yeah, you do need to do that.
So would somebody like to make a motion to open the public hearing?
Taylor, I'll let you do it.
All right, so I'll make a motion to open the public hearing and action on preliminary final plat for Public Works subdivision. Yeah, that's sufficient, right? Yes. That's my motion.
Have
I'll
a
second.
second? Do we
Second.
have a second? Public hearing is now open. Kim, just making sure we don't have anybody there.
There is nobody there currently.
Nobody there. All right. Well, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on the action on preliminary and final plat for the Public Works subdivision.
Do I have a second?
I'll second
I
it.
can second.
I think Jeremy beat you. Okay. All in favor for closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Aye. So the public hearing is now closed. Let's move on to discussion. Taylor, I know you had a question, and then Wes.
No, my question mainly was having to do with the procedure there. So I'm good.
Okay.
Unless, take it.
Go ahead, Wes.
Quick question for Brandon on the that access road. How steep is that going to be? Because I know that area is shaded during the winter and it gets awful icy with the snow.
Yeah, you're right. There will be some of those challenges, but as far as like the percent grade on the road, I don't know exactly what that will be. It will slope down from South Weaver Drive, but from South Weaver Drive back to where the gate will be is, I think it's roughly 300 feet. So we have a lot of room.
So they can do a running start to get up there.
Yeah, I don't think it'll even need that.
Now, this is the property is only going to be used for public works and nothing else, right?
Correct. At least that's what's envisioned at this point in time, yes.
Okay.
There are no plans for anything else.
All right. So we're on record that this is only for the Public Works Department then.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Jeremy?
Yeah, I may have missed it, and if I did, I apologize. But is there in the plans when there is funding for the actual Public Works building, is there plans to do privacy fencing in around that entire property? And if so, what type of privacy fencing was going to be involved there?
We will have to comply, obviously, just the same as anybody else would, with the code. And we are in the commercial recreation zone, and so the fencing required for that adjacent to residential will be required. And I think I also mentioned in my memo that the use that's being proposed here is a conditional use in this zone. And so a conditional use permit will be required when plans are developed. So
really,
will come back to you.
So really all we're looking at right now is the preliminary and final approval of the subdivision.
Yep, just of the plat.
Okay.
Chairman Boatwright, can I address something that was asked in the last meeting?
Please.
About the preliminary and final being combined. In the last Planning Commission meeting, Commissioner Losi asked a question about our guidelines for preliminary and final being combined. And very rightly, she brought up, well, what happens if we feel like there's a situation where they need to be looked at separately, especially as you get closer to 10. So that policy of being able to combine them, there's elements of that that have been in place for about 25 years. But the specific thing, the specific part of the ordinance that allows them to be combined has been in place for over a decade, for about 12 or 13 years. I looked that up to see when that code amendment was made. And there is typically the decision to split them if that happens. Typically that would be done at staff level, because if you guys will remember, there's 2 levels of review. There's 2 review steps that a project can go through before it comes to the planning commission. You know, and it would likely be in one of those areas that staff would look at it and say, this is complicated enough, or we're dealing with some really tricky issues with water or some other kind of infrastructure. And we could make the determination at that point to split it and require them to do preliminary and final. So anyways, does that answer the question that you brought up last time, Commissioner Losey?
Oh, you're on mute,
Oh,
Commissioner Losey.
you're on mute.
Oh, you're still on mute, Julie.
Oh,
There you
oh
go.
my goodness, this is going to drive me crazy. Okay, I apologize. No, it makes sense. I'm just wondering if, and maybe this is more of just an agenda, is if we split it out, at least in terms of discussion, because I don't know, I'm just trying to think like, hey, we're discussing the preliminary, you know, and then any issues that come up, it gives us that option to maybe still carry through the topic if there comes to where there's an issue. I don't know, maybe if it's not broken, we keep it the way it is, but I don't know. Sorry, that's not a definitive answer.
No, it's okay. I'm trying and if you and I mean, and you're always welcome, like, you know, you and I can sit down and have like a more detailed conversation about it. If there's some specific things that you're talking about with projects. But that was just the basics of the question that you brought up last time that I tried to address. So
no, and I
but if you
appreciate that.
wanna
I guess
talk about
maybe it is. Oh, sorry.
Hmm.
I was going to say, maybe I'm just, you know, planning on the event that we do end up getting, like you said, a proposal comes before the planning commission that is, you know, 8 lots, you know, that's going to require a lot more detailed kind of like background work. I just didn't want to have everything all lumped into one thing for a preliminary and a final. If there's a way to split it out, I guess that's my preference. But how did the other?
Oh, sorry. What's your specific concern? What do you mean when you say background work?
Well, just going back to the very first planning commission meeting that we had, where it was kind of breaking out the various stages of a development approval. There was a very specific set of, you know, requirements that needed to take place during the preliminary phase. And then there was another set of requirements to take place during the final. And I feel like having them combined is mushing them all together. So if we have separate, you know, things that we're looking to do during each stage, why are we combining them? Why not just keep them separate?
Those things that have to be, oh, sorry. Yeah. And just to try and address that, those things that you're looking at, they have to go through staff review first. And staff is actually the one that checks off all of the things related to water and sewer and zoning and all of those elements that go into it in preliminary and then in final. They have to meet with staff first, and staff reviews all of that, and they don't come to planning commission until each of those elements has been addressed and, for lack of a better term, signed off on by staff. the planning commission doesn't so much get into the details like, you know, measuring the lot widths and looking at the size of the water and sewer lines. That's all handled by staff. When projects, big or small, come to the commission, you're looking at things like, does it comply with the general plan for the area? Is it zoned properly? You know, and that'll be part of staff's report to you to break out those overarching elements and where the subdivision stacks up against it. As far as like frontages and lot sizes and zoning and things like that. You know, when you get a regular subdivision like a residential one or a larger commercial one, staff report will have all of that in there for you.
Okay. Well, and I guess part of it too is just because, again, going back to, and it was the planning commission meeting on 3/11, you know, where it was kind of discussing, hey, in the preliminary plat, you know, where we're like kind of like our roles, and that's obviously preliminaries where you're going to be having a public hearing. You're going to have the opportunity to hear what the public wants to say about a subdivision, a development proposal, all of those things. And then it comes down to either we approve, we deny, we table, and that's that point during the preliminary. Now the final plat is there's no public comment. There's no public hearing that's being done on that because it's taken place during the preliminary stage. And I guess that's why I'm pushing the separation of those two things, because there's very distinct activities that happen during a preliminary that don't take place during the final and vice versa. So why are we combining something that should be kept separate? So I don't know how to better explain that.
Can I interject here just real quickly? Julie, is your concern specifically with what's coming before us, or just the general concept of combining the two and not necessarily this project?
It has nothing to do with this. It's the concept.
Okay. So I'm wondering, oh, go ahead, Sherry.
I was going to say, Julie, do you want to why don't you and I'll shoot you an email after, and why don't you and I sit down and we'll see if I can get a better understanding of what your concerns are. And we can talk about it and see if there's something that we need to do differently or better.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Sherry, if I may, I think this speaks to a bigger issue of our code as well. Because, I mean, as I'm looking at, Title 11 for subdivision regulations, there is no definition or explanation of a preliminary plat approval, only final. And this might be something that we want to recommend to the city council to look at, or maybe within our code committee to address. Because I think what Commissioner Losey is getting at is we have a little bit of a definition problem in understanding the process.
So Taylor, could you take that to the code committee?
I certainly could. I think it might take some time before we get to it, just based upon the priorities that I'm seeing out playing out in front of us. But yeah, we can most definitely bring it up. It's outside Title 10, but I think everything under subdivision regulations needs to find a new home under Title 10 anyway.
Well,
that's just my opinion.
Michelle, let's just make sure we note that in the minutes, and then sounds like we have our first item to report to the city council on. So any other questions, concerns, or comments about the subdivision?
If my mic is still working, I do actually have a question for Brandon. Really quickly, looking at the plat, so the sections 2 and 3, and I know it's wider, and then it narrows down to where it looks like it says 50 feet. Is 50 feet sufficient for 2 lanes of traffic, meaning incoming and outgoing? Like, I know it's got wider frontage at South Weber Drive, but as it narrows back, are we going to be in a situation where trucks are going to be having to wait for one to come through for the other to go? Or is there sufficient width?
Yeah, we're comfortable that there's sufficient width.
Okay, that was my only question.
So Sherry, would you clarify for us what we should do with this? Just want to make sure.
The proper thing, if the commission feels it's appropriate, would be to make a motion and recommendation one way or the other, whether you recommend that the city council approve it or whether you recommend that they deny it. So that's the course of action that the planning commission takes with respect to subdivision plats. You don't approve them, you make a recommendation on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
A quick comment, Gary. If I
Yeah,
may.
go ahead.
The city council meeting at 8:30 this evening on their packet on the resolution 21-19. In the fifth whereas clause, it says, the planning commission held a public hearing and reviewed all the supporting documents on the 18th of March, 2021, which was continued to April 8th, 2021, and gave final recommendation for approval. City council has already said we've given approval to this.
So
They haven't even met yet, and we haven't even voted on it yet. That's a little bit of a discrepancy in my book.
Yeah, so I guess they're making an assumption, and so I have been
You know what an
asked-
assumption is?
Yeah. So, and I've been asked to report on whatever we decide as a commission here.
It just kind of gets me that the city council is saying, hey, planning commission, you're already going to approve this, don't bother.
Wes, if I could just jump in there, and Jamie can correct me if I'm wrong, but resolutions are typically written in the approval with approval language, so that if they are approved, then they're ready to sign.
But shouldn't we make a recommendation first before a resolution is written?
Well, we have to prepare the packet, and so they have to prepare the resolution with language that's prepared for them. If you can, that doesn't mean, I mean, you make whatever recommendation you want. If it's different, then the city council can either take that or not, and move to change the language in the resolution.
So what if we abstain from voting on this?
The language of the ordinance would be changed to reflect whatever the decision of the commission is. It's not saying that like Brandon said, it's not binding you to act one way or the other. If you change if you make something recommendation different than what's in the resolution, then the resolution gets amended to be whatever you want.
So
To reflect whatever your vote is.
And that's the thing, we're just making a recommendation.
Right.
Here. So we could recommend not to do it, but the city council can still approve it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct. And sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you act to not recommend, then the resolution presented to the council would need to be modified, and the council would take into account the fact that the planning commission did not recommend approval.
So Commissioner Johnson, I think there was some time was of the essence in this. I think Sherry and Brandon could speak a little more to that.
Yes, we have a purchase agreement with a closing date, and in order to try to give us time for recordation of the documents, there was a change to the schedule so that there would allow sufficient time to hit the closing date.
So Commissioner Boatright, I'm ready to approve this. I guess I just have one other question of staff on a matter of code. And for reference, I'm looking at Title 11, Chapter 1, Section 3, which is applicability of subdivisions. And it states here that under final plat approval, paragraph B, it states that Lots shall not be transferred or sold or approval given on final plat approval until the improvements required in connection with the subdivision have been constructed or guaranteed as provided herein. And so I'm not really sure if that's applicable to what we're doing here, but it is still a matter of code. So, I mean, I'm ready to approve, just with the caveat that there is that phrasing within our city code that improvements have either been guaranteed or provided. Maybe staff can speak to that language in code.
If there's a particular improvement that's being proposed, like with a residential subdivision, all of those things need services. And so therefore they would need to bring the improvements with the subdivision. At this point in time, there is not a specific development of this property being proposed.
So we would probably see another plat coming in that would allow for those improvements to be included.
Not another plat. The plat is just taking care of the property. It's creating lot number 2, which would allow for the building of a facility at some point in time in the future. But in the future, you will see a site plan, and there will be a conditional use permit associated with that when that time comes. And that's when those required improvements will have to be, if they're not installed, then they'll have to be escrowed for, just like anything else.
Okay, so maybe within our role as planning commissioners, make a recommendation that this item of code be spelled out a little bit differently, because it reads, to me at least, that we'll have a guarantee of improvements being made, or that they'll have been made as part of the final plat approval. And so maybe you just take a look at the wording.
Michelle, can you take note of that as well? We'll add that to the list.
And then I have a question, and I don't know if this is appropriate for Jamie or if David Larson is on the phone. I know that Paul Strum put in public comments, and he was referencing some of the language in the actual property exchange agreement. If we as a planning commission are making the recommendation to approve the purchase to city council, does the language in the purchase agreement need to be nailed down now? Or is that something that's taken care of with city council?
Jamie, can you take that?
Yeah, I received Paul's edits. There was one name misspelled, and then when we added a new trust that was a partial owner of the property, we forgot to add them to the list of contacts. I think those are technical edits that we'll just make after these are approved. I don't think they change the substance of the agreement in any way.
Okay.
We can vote that
I just wanted to
one
make sure.
Thanks, Jamie. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary and final plat for Public Works subdivision, also amending Smith and Edwards subdivision located at approximately 128 East South River
Taylor,
Drive.
you want to make a recommendation. It's a recommendation.
Right. So I'm sorry if I missed that. Yeah, we make the recommendation for preliminary and final plat approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Commissioner Davis. Let's do a roll call vote. Commissioner Losey?
Aye.
Commissioner Walton?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. Okay. Moving on. Item number 6. Public hearing and action on an ordinance repealing South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article A, Agricultural Aircraft Hazard Zone A10, and amending South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article H, Commercial Highway Zone, CH. Sherry, why don't you tell us about this?
Just by way of introduction, and thank you, Chairman Boatwright, for allowing me to introduce it. Just by way of introduction, as you're all aware, the city has a code committee that is working on a great number of projects to revise and clarify and clean up the city code. To some of it's to reflect changes that have come out of the general plan. Some of it are just problems that staff has noticed as we've gone through it. So it's a variety of things that have gone into amending the city code. As we've gone through, one of the things that we've noticed with respect to the agriculture aircraft hazard zone is not only is it not anywhere in our current zoning, it is also nowhere on the future land use plan. I believe that the intent at one time was to basically create a zone that's most directly impacted by Hill Air Force Base, and to make sure that uses in that zone are compatible in those areas that the Air Force has identified as being at the highest risk. But what the city has done, rather than implementing that zone, is, the Air Force, the Department of Defense has easements and things in place. And they are also working on compatible land uses and a variety of other things that regulate what can happen and how it needs to happen in those higher risk areas. And so because of those things, because it's not anywhere in our city now, we don't anticipate it being anywhere, and there are other safety and regulatory measures in place. The code committee, and of which I'm a part of, but staff in the code committee in discussing this feel that it's appropriate if we just remove the A10 zone from the city's code. And so that, I don't know if you want to do these as two separate things or if you want to do it all as one, because I can talk about the other one too, or you can handle this one first. What are you most comfortable with?
Let's have you talk about the other one as well, because we do have a public hearing with this as well. So let's get information for both.
Okay. And as far as the commercial highway zone goes, the city is in the process of revising the land uses for all of the zones. We are at the Planning Commission meeting in May. You're going to be presented with a matrix of all the revised land uses in all of the zones, commercial and residential throughout the city, as well as combining that with the definitions that you all were previously provided just for a reference point. So those will come for public hearing and beginning your review in May. But due to a variety of circumstances, the city felt it was appropriate to just tackle the commercial highway zone first. And so what you have in your packet, what you have before you, is the ordinance in the city code that regulates commercial highway. And it just has the land uses swapped out. No other portion of the ordinance has changed. The code committee is just looking at land uses right now. And once land uses are done, then the code committee and staff will work together to work on other parts of the zones. But for now, just the uses in the commercial highway zone are being presented to the commission for discussion and recommendation to city council.
Thank you. Taylor, as a member of the code committee, is there anything you'd like to add before we open up the public hearing? Yeah, I think there was a request on behalf of members of the
code update committee to specifically have a conversation about a couple of particular uses. One of them being hotels in being allowed in this zone. And Sherry, I have to apologize to you. I don't have my notebook in front of me. There was one other particular use that the code committee wanted the planning commission to weigh in on, and I don't have it in front of me, and my memory is escaping me. Do you recall? I think it was highlighted.
It was hotels and keep talking, I'll find it. I gotta go back in my notes.
Was it the indoor gun range?
No,
No, it wasn't that.
no,
No.
mobile businesses.
Wasn't it fuel stations?
No.
Yeah, I think fuel stations, it might have been truck stops, but I like I said, I don't have that matrix in front of me.
It was not fuel stations or truck stops. Service stations is in there. Let me get the matrix in front of me. It'll just take me a minute.
That's fair enough. And I think until we get that, we can go ahead and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we go ahead and open the public meeting? Kim, do we have anybody there?
We do not have anybody here.
Okay, well, let's open it. If somebody would like to make a motion.
I can make a motion that we open public hearing and action on ordinance repealing South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article A, and also amending South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article H.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the public hearing is now open. Kim, has anybody joined us?
They have not. There is nobody there.
Okay. Well, I'd look for a motion to close the public hearing now.
I can go ahead and make a motion to close public hearing on said agenda item.
I'll second.
Thanks, Commissioner Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Sherry, do you have that additional information?
I do. The other one besides hotel was wholesale trade or distribution. And then wrapped into the hotel conversation, Commissioner Walton, was the idea of transient lodging. It was those three.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think the intent was to really have a conversation about the land uses is identified up front, but specifically when we get through that, look at those additional land uses and have a conversation about their applicability in the zone.
Okay. Questions or comments? Let's start the discussion.
The small wind energy systems, that was deleted from conditional uses. Any reasoning behind that?
Just when we were looking at the uses as outlined in the general plan, we didn't feel like the wind generation, energy generation was a particularly good use to have in commercial highway.
Would it be beneficial if we had Kim pull up the city's zoning map so we could see that on the screen?
That would be great, actually. Yes, thank you.
Kim, would you please do that?
Yeah, let me find it. And you can do it if you've got it in front of you as well, but let me take a look real quick.
Yeah, I just think that would maybe be helpful so that you can see where the commercial highway is as opposed to the regular commercial. So you can see why we're differentiating between some of these, because it's tied to the intensity of use and the amount of land that it takes. I'm wanting to preserve commercial highway for certain areas that will have a commercial benefit, rather than letting whatever come in and take up other areas that could potentially be commercially viable. So, thank you, Brendan. So when you're looking at, this is just a little bit of explanation. This is the city's current zone. And it's these red areas that are presently zoned commercial highway. Do you have the future land use map too, Brandon?
Yeah, I can go grab it. Hold on.
Yeah. And then you'll see when he pulls that up, the areas that out of the general plan process came for onto the future land use map as commercial highway.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's still the red, correct?
Yeah, this is the projected land use map.
Okay.
Hold on. Zoom in.
And then just for clarification, the hash marks require a development agreement, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's correct.
Okay. Comments, questions, concerns?
On the, will any current agreements be grandfathered in on this? I'm thinking the Stevens property. When we had a presentation on that, there was the developer kind of leaked out that Maverick was already going to build a gas station there. So are they going to be grandfathered into that as a permitted use?
We don't have an application for anything on the Stevens property.
Okay.
Nothing was ever approved.
All right.
There's no vesting on any properties on the Stevens property.
What's the difference?
I think, oh, go ahead, Wes, sorry.
The difference between a gasoline service station and a service station. We're looking at Maverick versus Jiffy Lube there.
Are you looking at conditional uses, Wes? Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up to where you are.
On conditional uses.
Mm-hmm.
So
what's the difference you say between a gasoline service station and
the service station would be like a Jiffy Lube or something like that.
Let me pull up the definitions and I'll pull that out for you.
It's funny how as we've been going through these discussions, how much we rely already on the matrix that we've developed and also all the definitions. So I apologize. It's without those in front of me, there's been all I'm looking at is a list and trying to remember how we got to making this list. But without the matrix and the definitions, it's really hard to describe how we got to creating the conditional uses and the permitted uses as you see them here. So thank you, Sherry, for pulling that up.
And can I just say something that was a little frustrating with the packet, just a comment, was again in the packet, I know it had it listed out what the, permitted uses are going to be. It then listed out what the commercial uses are. And of course it ties into definitions that we talked about in our last planning commission meeting, but it was very frustrating. And I don't know if it's been very apparent to the public as well, exactly what we mean when we're saying communications tower. And yes, you can always go back and reference the definitions, but right now, because these are being defined, for lack of a better word, there's no way that they can go see these things. And having to dig through packets, I spent a lot of time going back to the planning commission agenda, pulling up that specific section and actually reading through, oh, this is what they mean when they're saying agriculture. This is what they mean when they're saying a gun range indoor. Even something like the hotel, what is it we're exactly defining a hotel to be? And so if there's a way in future code discussions that we can make those definitions just a little easier to access, I think it's just going to help the discussion. Because I kind of feel like I'm all over the place right now with all of the papers and everything that I've got, trying to link everything and make sure I'm understanding each of these uses. But that's just more of a suggestion.
Okay.
So Julie, if I can, correct me if I'm wrong here on this, Sherry, but we will actually be approving those definitions to be included into city code at our next planning commission meeting. So I think for the time being, we'll have those available to us for our future conversation, but in the very short future, as planning commission meetings go, they will actually be part of city code here before too long.
That's correct. And that's what I brought up earlier, is that the entire thing, the matrix and the definitions, will be coming to you guys for your review and recommendation at the next planning commission meeting.
Okay.
So Wes still has an outstanding question of difference between service station and gasoline service stations.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the definitions. My apologies. My computer is acting up a little bit.
That's okay. Just want to make sure we didn't leave Wes's question out there hanging.
Oh, so. No, it's just taking me a minute. Truthfully, we could pull gasoline service station off there because in the definitions, it just refers you to service station. So I don't think it would be an issue at all if the commission felt it appropriate to pull gasoline service station off there, since the definition just refers you to the other one.
Okay.
There was something that I noticed with the conditional uses where it's referencing the dry cleaning services. When you go to the definitions for dry cleaning services, it says to reference or see laundry. And then when you go to laundry in the definition, there's nothing there. So, and I'm sure it's just something that got missed with all of the work that's gone into it, but I'm just thinking if we're going to reference something, we need to then have it defined, especially if we're going to put it in as a conditional use. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. Let me pull up the previous packet because the version of the definitions that I'm looking at has laundry in it. So let me pull up the definitions you were given before and see if I can figure out what the problem is.
Okay. Because I printed those definitions off of the packet. And it wasn't the redlined version. It was the version that I thought was the clean version. Because remember how it had the two different versions in it? So if that has been addressed, awesome. If not, let's address it.
Another question I have on the permitted uses, what is a quasi-public use?
Church.
Okay.
There was a lot into that though too. A lot more uses besides just a church. Right, Sherry?
Yeah, that's the one that pops into my head the most, but there's also nonprofit organizations. The definition of it is a use or facility owned or operated exclusively by a private nonprofit religious, recreational, charitable, or philanthropic institution. It shall have the use of serving the public, the general public, and could include such uses as church, hospital, civic, social club, museum. So it could be a hospital, it could be an Elks Club, it could be, a synagogue, something like that. So, and Commissioner Losey, it looks like when we went through and tracked all the changes and pulled all the red lines out, for some reason, the wording for laundry did get pulled out. So I've got a note to myself to make sure it gets back in before it comes to you all.
Okay, perfect.
So what about hotels? That's something the city council specifically wanted to address, and I know there's been some chatter on social media about that. Let's just dive in. Commissioner Losey, I think you might have a comment.
I do have a comment, and I think I'm just going back to one of the big things with hotels. It's fine to define it, but I think if we're going to have any kind of, it needs to be further defined. And partly, I almost wonder if it needs to be removed, because I know based on the general plan survey, the results going back and looking at that, the large majority of people that commented said they did not want to see a hotel in South Weaver. So and I think it was 75% had a no response. And granted, the question at the time was transient lodging, which didn't really delve into, well, what does transient lodging mean, which I understand that. But most of the Facebook chatter, from what I'm hearing, is people are saying, no hotels, and granted, they're also saying no commercial, but we have these commercial designated zones. Now we've got to figure out what's appropriate to put into them. And so if a hotel is going to be put in as a conditional use, which I believe that's what it is, correct?
Yeah.
Is a hotel is a conditional use, is that would require, a developer that wanted to put that in to come forward with some kind of a plan, there'd be public hearing, correct? And a chance to weigh in and say yes or no.
It depends. If they're on an already pre-approved lot, conditional use does not automatically trigger a public hearing. And the other thing to remember about conditional uses when you're discussing this is the purpose of conditional uses is to look at potential impacts. And if the proponent of the project can reasonably mitigate those impacts, it is an approved use. Conditional uses means it's approved with conditions. There's still a review. There's still time to require things of them to offset potentially hazardous impacts. But if those can be reasonably mitigated, then they have a right to have that approved if those impacts can be mitigated. Am I correct in that, Jamie?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's sometimes easy to think that a conditional use means only if you want it to happen, when in fact, conditional use is an approved use so long as conditions can be met to mitigate those factors that are in the statute.
Okay, good.
Okay. Well, hearing all of that, then I guess it just makes, I was just gonna say, hearing that, it just makes me wonder if we know that we've got a large percentage of our citizens who are against a hotel in a commercial highway zone, why would we have it as a conditional use? Where's the benefit? How does that show that we're listening to them and we're hearing what they have to say regarding what they want and what they see in terms of the future use for these areas?
So I think it's really hard to have this conversation based upon the feedback that we got on the general plan because of the question that was phrased. And I totally get, it's transient lodging, and we're not talking about transient lodging, we're talking about a hotel. And I think it's really hard as a planning commissioner to also say, okay, we can take that recommendation, take that vision from the citizens and apply it. But what's hard is to understand the impact to any commercial development down the road and to the city from a financial basis. I think as this question was batted around and the code update committee, I think it's really hard to make a recommendation on this use without also understanding the limitations that we would want to try to put on to a use like a hotel. Like for instance, like height, total number of units.
Yep.
You know, I think a hotel can be configured in so many different ways that maybe, you know, a high-rise hotel is definitely not something that South Weaver City could support, you know, based upon its small town desire to remain a small town. But, you know, there are other hotels that might be more palatable to the citizens based upon the feedback that we got in the general plan. So I think for me, it's really hard to say yes, no on hotel without providing the bounds and the limits that we might put on a developer who wants to put a hotel within the city and within our commercial highway zone. You know, I think for me, when you start talking about a zone called commercial highway, there is a component of transient lodging. And it's really, like I say, it's hard based upon the feedback that was received and the question that was asked during the general plan update to say, well, hold on, we want a commercial highway zone, but no transient lodging. And they just don't seem to really, I don't know, blend with that desire, right? Now, I don't know. For me, I think from a city perspective, it would make sense to allow the use, but bound the use so that we maintain that character, or, you know, that we don't have detrimental impacts to the surrounding community, but still allow it just because of the kind of revenue that they can generate within the city. I hope I'm making sense, because there's a lot of moving pieces to this conversation.
Taylor,
There are.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Wilsey.
No, I was just going to say there are, and that's why, and I understand why the code committee is probably having a really hard time figuring out for specifically hotel, you know, because when you look at all of the other conditional uses that are out there, you know, what is appropriate, you know, and I think a lot of the concerns that I can specifically, you know, say have been said about a hotel is the more transient nature, the elements that get brought in. You know, there was even a comment that was made in terms of the potential for, you know, sex trafficking and prostitution. And again, it's the elements that we're trying to, you know, maybe prevent to the very best of our ability from coming in and being a negative impact in our city. You know, but the same thing could be said for a medical laboratory. I mean, if we're bringing in, you know, a plasma donation center or something of that nature, it's not necessarily bringing in, you know, the highest caliber, but that's a conditional use. So that's something a developer could come in and say, hey, because your code in your commercial highway zone allows for this, you know, we're going to go ahead and put in, what is it, biomass? I don't even know the names of them. But I just wonder, you know, can we take it out? Is it hurting anything by removing some of these designations as a conditional use? And then when we get to the point on a development that they bring it as a plan, and then we have the discussion and we involve the public, but we're not putting it in and saying, yeah, it's allowable. Because as a planning commission, we can't change code. We can only recommend to planning or to the city council, or we can deny recommendation, you know, but we can't go and change anything. That's why this code review is so important. And what we have in our code needs to protect our city, because this is our teeth. This is what's allowing us to tell a developer, no, it's not allowed. Sorry, pound sand, for lack of a better word.
So I hear you, and I think that's the struggle that we've had as the code update committee has met. Like there are certain things that, certain uses that the code committee didn't even want to entertain as part of any of our zones. And when we looked at those uses, we wanted a developer to come to the city and say, this is what we're thinking on this use, and have that conversation. I think there's a line though that you need to consider. You know, how many uses are we really wanting to have that be part of our policy, even if it's unwritten policy? And it's for me, I think I'd really like to digest more of the commercial highway zone and see what kind of, I don't know, character or regulations we can put into the zone before I say, or would be comfortable with a recommendation of the city council on whether or not we allow hotels in or out of the city.
So Taylor and Sherry, can I ask you this, and maybe Blair, you could jump on this as well. Is there a specific reason that this section is coming to us now versus something else?
I can answer that question very easily because I was the one that requested it. And it has been taken care of, but I was gonna hold my comment, but is truck stops. That was the main reason that is, I think, been coming. It was one of the hot buttons, let's put it that way. It wasn't hotels, it wasn't that, it was the fact that we could have a proposal for a truck stop here in our city, which is 10 times worse than any hotel or anything else. And so, but my question would have been in council meeting for Jamie, wondering if by just the way it's stated in the definition of the service station, if that keeps us from having a truck stop.
I think we ought to note it with more precision if your intent is to keep a truck stop away. And so what you ought to do is distinguish a service station and a gas station from a truck stop,
right,
and then have a definition that addresses all three.
And that was when you read it, it just says, you know, the last sentence in the definition of the service station is nothing that relates similar to a truck stop or whatever. I just didn't know if that covered us well enough. That was my only concern. And Gary, sorry to give you a long answer, but that's the reason I asked for this to come forward as a hot button to just fix this item, and then we can go address all the other items.
I appreciate that. I asked the question, so I appreciate the answer. So
I would just follow up as far as the definitions go. The difference between a service station and a truck stop is tied to the amenities, showers, laundry facilities, things like that. The ability for trucks to park there, like long haul stuff to park there overnight. I mean, because the way South Weaver sits, you know, at the intersection of two major roads and before you go up a canyon, I can see why for someone it would be appealing to have it there. But I also know that the city doesn't want it there, and that's fine. But the difference between a gas station and a truck stop is the amenities. And that's why we have the reference to anything meeting the definition of a truck stop is not a service station. And then a truck stop has a definition that lists out those things. So that protects your ability to have a Maverick or a Chevron or whatever, but you're not going to get a big Flying J or something like that.
thank you. Okay.
I'll comment. Actually, I'm glad. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just saying, I'm glad that truck stop is not as a permitted use, because I don't think anybody in the city wants any of our commercial highway zones turned into a truck stop. And I may be speaking out, but I believe that there's been threats that that's just what we're going to do if you're not going to give us this, which I don't like threats. I don't think that works very well. I don't think that gets the citizens on anybody's side for anything. But I think because of the opposition on a truck stop and it being removed, I kind of feel like some of these permitted uses also need to be taken off, because there's nothing that says a developer on a lot of land can't come to the city council and request a code change that would allow them to then put up a building or something that they would want to. So I guess I'm just not wanting to just give them open rein and be like, yeah, hotel's an option. And there's nothing that we can do about it because it's in our code. I'd rather have them come and ask, and then we can go through the proper procedures and plan, you know, the planning commission to the city council, you know, and have those discussions and have those checkpoints with the citizens.
That is a possibility.
Especially because I don't think we have limits.
That is a possibility too, just to answer that. If you did choose to recommend that it not be on there, if someone did have a project that they wanted to pursue, because this is always an option for property owners, whether it's someone that lives in the city or an outside developer, it's always an option to petition the city to amend the code to allow it. And if it was something, along those lines, then at that point, when they come to petition for a code change, there's more that the city could do in terms of asking them to present exactly what they want to do so that the city can get a better idea of what it is they want to do when they entertain the request.
Okay. I like that.
But the
And just to
reality is,
clarify, you do not have to act on this tonight. If there are things you want staff to take back and do, we can do that. This and any other code change is not something that has to be acted on in the same meeting where it's presented to you. Just so you don't think you're being pushed to act on it tonight.
I like Commissioner Losey's recommendation that we get a list of definitions of what these permitted uses are and the conditional uses. I think, having a breakout as this is what is permitted in a permitted use and this is what is not permitted would be very beneficial.
Okay.
go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
On the landscaping requirements, there's nothing in there about xeriscaping. I think we ought to have something in there to encourage xeriscaping.
Okay.
So, Wes, if I might, the request is just to look at the permitted and conditional uses, and that at a future date, we're going to come back to the code update committee and look at all of the commercial highway zone and provide some feedback recommendations to the planning commission.
So we're only looking at permitted and conditional uses then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Blair, did you have your hand up?
And maybe just to clarify for the rest of the commission, the reason I asked was to get just rid of the hot button items that could possibly come back very soon. And like Commissioner Walton just said, is so that the rest of this will be gone through with a fine tooth comb and other things added and changed. But it's to get rid of a couple hot button items to answer Wes's question.
So the council would like us to move on this sooner than later. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Blair?
That's completely your decision.
Okay.
I did make that recommendation to move this as fast as possible.
Okay.
So that a certain proposal can come forward.
I will say though, by having it properly agendized and the public hearing and things like that, and this is another thing where Jamie can correct me if I'm wrong, the city has bought, for lack of a better term, bought itself some time to discuss and consider these things without having to grant someone a use if they come in and apply for it. Is that not what the pending ordinance doctrine does, Jamie?
Yeah, as usual, you're correct.
Sweet, it's on the record. Yeah,
So-
from the time something like this or any other ordinance appears on the agenda, I believe it's 180 days that the city has to, for lack of a better term, put off an application that is affected by the ordinance. So it gives the city time to work on it and consider it without having to act on the application that's been presented.
Okay.
Okay.
So I do have a question about the difference between a hotel and a motel. Taylor, I'm guessing that there was a specific reason that the word hotel was used instead of motel, because there is a difference. And Commissioner Losey, I understand your concerns. I understand the concerns of many of the residents. Generally, in a normal year, I live about a month of my life out of a hotel, and I've never experienced, at least as a hotel guest, those things that you mentioned. Because there is a difference, with different brands of hotels. You bring in one brand, and yes, it could easily bring in that type of activity. other brands don't. So again, Taylor, I think my question was, you know, a specific reason for hotel, not motel. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, there was a definition for a motel that was batted back and forth, and it wasn't even considered. So that's why you don't even see the word motel on here. I apologize. I really wish I had a copy of the definitions in front of me right now. But I want to say that the definition of hotel might exclude the use of a motel. Sherry, is that?
Let me get up to it.
Can you
I've got the
confirm?
definitions in front of me.
And I also know why Sherry is looking that
So
up.
the other big difference between hotel and motel is the design of the building. Motels, the individual rooms are accessed from outside, from doors. Hotels, the rooms are accessed through a common hallway and a common area, and there's a lobby as part of the building. This is what the definition of hotel is. A building and associated facilities offering overnight accommodations for guests with access provided through common entrance, lobby, or hallway to individual guest rooms, and which may include additional services such as restaurants, conference and meeting rooms, entertainment, and recreational facilities. And those things are not found in motels. Motels, it's just, you pull up, you walk right into your room, maybe they have weird eggs in a continental breakfast, but yeah, it has to do with the design in the building and how you access the rooms.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on hotels?
Just from a state of clarity, Sherry, if hotels is listed in conditional use and someone uses that to present a recommendation to build a hotel in the appropriate zone, is it something where the city council is forced to approve the hotel, or is there still an opportunity there's still an opportunity to reject the proposal? It's not like we're forced to, well, someone ticked all the boxes and it's a hotel, so it has to be approved. How's that? Can you help educate me on how that works?
How does the conditional use process work?
Yeah.
The planning commission, and Kim can correct me if I'm wrong, but the planning commission typically reviews conditional uses, not the city council. And you would look at things like traffic and height and noise and lighting and things along those lines. Another thing that we're going to work on revising is the conditional use ordinance that outlines the things that will be considered when looking at whether or not to grant one. You can put conditions on the proponent, on the project. Those conditions have to be reasonable. They have to be tied to a potential detrimental impact. There has to be a direct connection between the condition and a detrimental impact. And if those detrimental impacts can be reasonably overcome, then they are entitled to approval. If they can't be, then the city can deny it, but you have to give the project applicant, you have to get pretty specific with what the problem is so that they can propose a solution. And if that solution can be proposed, then they are entitled to have the project approved.
And brand is not a problem, correct?
And what?
Like hotel chain, the hotel chain is not a problem. I mean, that's not something
that would not be a factor. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the factors you can consider are limited to those that are established in city code. There are 9, and as Sherry mentioned, they largely relate to the size of the development, the traffic generated by the development, parking, and then whether it's complementary to the surrounding neighborhoods. And there
Which is rather ambiguous, right?
Yep.
So going back to my earlier comment, without defining, some of the bases for issuance of conditional uses, it's really hard for me to make a decision on whether hotels should be allowed in commercial highway or not. And so I kind of feel stuck between a rock and a hard place in trying to decide this based upon the feedback that we received in the general plan and what we would consider for approval as a conditional use. So my recommendation at this point would be for us to remove, if it's controversial, to remove hotel until we have a conversation on the basis of issuance for conditional uses, and maybe bring it back at that point as a topic of conversation.
Thoughts from anyone else?
I don't know if this helps with the discussion or not with the hotels. First of all, I agree kind of with Taylor. I think that hotels right now is not defined enough. There's not enough limits in terms of what quality, class, however it is the hotels are designated. For reference, the hotel that's in Uinta, Lower Uinta, is a Best Western. It's a plus. Canyon Pines is the name of it. They actually have a total of 52 rooms. I did a little bit of research, and on the weekends, their rooms are 100% booked, and which makes sense because you have people that are coming in, wanting to enjoy, all of the recreational opportunities, here in Utah. And so that makes sense. During the week, they're only at about a 30-40% booking rate. Now, of course, COVID has over the last year probably had a significant impact on hotels, just because a lot of people are not traveling. So, and given the location of some of our commercial highway areas, I could see a hotel, being something that is used. But for those of us that have traveled and gone to hotels, there is a different class. La Quinta allows pets, and I know that for some, they love it because they want to take, their little dogs and, everything with them. Other people stay away from those hotels simply for that nature. And so I do think we need to I don't know, I'm going to recommend that we remove hotel as well. I like the truck stop's already gone, but because we just don't have it defined enough, whereas if you were to put in a Hilton, like a Hilton Garden Inn, which usually put a lot more, aesthetics in terms of the exterior of the hotel and the landscaping and all of that, could that be a better option? I just don't want to go ahead and say, yep, it's in our code, we have to allow it. I'd rather have that be something that is brought up on an individual basis for that discussion. That's kind of my thought.
And that's the reason we're putting this in as a conditional use. That way it gives us, the planning commission, opportunity to say yay or nay to the type of hotel that would go in there.
I would say
I don't want it as a conditional use. I want it out. I don't think that it should be as a conditional use. Because I think it already kind of ties it.
When you all consider this type of conversation, a recommendation on my part would be that you review both the definition of hotel and review the standards listed in our conditional use ordinance. And in my view, the standards presently in the ordinance are insufficient to cover some of the things that you all have mentioned as concerns about a hotel. And before you allow any new uses as conditional uses, you may wish to make sure that those standards are up to what you would like them to be, because you're limited to those standards when you decide whether or not to allow a conditional use. And so, Julie, some of the things you mentioned about why you would prefer a certain brand hotel over another brand hotel, I think you could isolate independent of the brand and have them be standards in the conditional use ordinance that you then could apply and use as a planning commission when you make your recommendation on those applications.
Could we implement those standards under the hotel as a sub paragraphs under the hotel?
Typically, no, they would be standards that would apply to all conditional uses, but the way they're phrased right now, there's some subjectivity. And I think you may want to make them a little bit more objective.
Another thing
So
too,
if I,
is, like he said, those would go in the conditional use section. The definitions, you don't want to have anything regulatory in the definitions. You want to have the regulatory stuff in the conditional use section. And if you want to look at them both, like we can work through some stuff with the code committee. And if you want to look at the land uses, the conditional use regulations and the definitions, the two of them you're already going to have at your next meeting. If you want to have something with conditional uses to look at as well to inform the discussion, I can bring you what is already existing. We can work on some things so that you have all three of them to look at together. You can give me some direction on that.
Commissioner Walton, you were going to say something too.
yeah, thanks. So I would just go back to our code. Right now it's saying that the uses are not detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare of the persons or interest of property improvements in the community. And so when we talk about the use of a hotel, we need to be able to outline what are potential detriments to those to health, safety, and welfare, and can they be reasonably mitigated by any developer? And so I hear you, Julie. I don't want to bring a use into the city that has the potential to traffic in people. But is that something that we can leverage on a developer? Is a question that I have. I mean, it happens, I think, in probably more uses than we wanted to admit in any city. But I definitely feel like I feel like we need to have a conversation about how a hotel would be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the city of South Weaver before I'm willing to allow it as a conditional use.
So Commissioner Davis, you've been a little quiet. Do you have anything you'd like to share or add?
Yeah, I'm just a sponge today. This is a good discussion, I think. I am going to take you up on that offer, Sherry, because that would really be helpful to see all those things side by side and really better understand it. I guess I'm a little quieter because I think I'm not as well educated as the rest of the commissioners here on all the different ins and outs. But I tend to agree with what's been said by Jamie from the perspective of I think we need to remove a lot of the vagueness in the verbiage that we have in the codes and be a little more specific and direct on what we want in the city so that we can really lay that out. And then I think that would end up addressing Taylor and Commissioner Walton and Commissioner Losey's concerns about having something in the city that maybe we didn't intend, but also not immediately saying no to a lot of the things out there. But if we break out the definitions in the code well enough and we have those guidelines well defined, then I think that allows us a lot of flexibility for developers to come with really unique solutions that maybe we can't envision at this point. But if they come with a really unique solution, really kind of to what Commissioner Losey was talking about, where they present something to us individually, then I think that's something that could work for the city, and then it would give us a better idea of what's possible, I guess.
And so Sherry, just going back to Blair's concern, sounds like we have 180 days for the truck stop thing that we have 180 days to work through this. Well, hopefully sooner than 180 days, but
yeah,
we do have some time. Okay.
Yeah, where it's in place, that pending ordinance doctrine has been enacted. And
Okay.
so it gives it's by the city time.
Okay. Anything, oh,
And it's not just truck stops. It's any application.
okay. Any other discussion on hotels? I do have one other question, but shifting gears a little bit, but I don't want to move on unless everybody's done with hotels.
I'm done with hotels, but I do have a question on this topic, item number 6. So just when you're done, Commissioner Boatright.
Go
Circle back.
ahead. Go ahead.
So, and part of this is I think that these two, the public hearing and action items for the 2 different sections of code, I wish they'd been split out, because I think, you know, for the most part, the discussion on the Article A, the agricultural aircraft hazard zone, I don't think anybody had any issues. And obviously I'm fine with recommending that recommendation be made to remove that. But I feel like the Article H code has been discussed, and I don't want to go on ad nauseum. There's a lot more work that needs to be done on this before I'm ready to make a recommendation. And so how procedurally do we go about if we're only recommending one portion of a discussion item and a public hearing item, but the other is being rolled forward or being recommended for being rolled forward for additional information gathering?
I think just exactly what you said is how we could do it.
I think she just made a motion.
I think so. So remember what you said, because I'm going to ask my question now.
All right.
Remember. And Commissioner Walton, you could help with this. So I noticed that, let's see, in the permitted uses, recreational vehicle sales and rental is a permitted use, but then vehicle and equipment sales and rental is a conditional use. So an RV dealership is permitted, a car dealership is conditional. I'm just curious as to why the reasoning for that.
That's a really great question. I feel like as we compared the land use matrix to the definitions, might have hit those at different times, right? Just because they're at different points in the alphabet, we might have had a different feeling based upon the day that we reviewed that section of the conditional uses. It's a great question, because they are very similar in the use of the land, maybe a little less in the impact of traffic. But that is definitely something I'll take note of, and we can bring that back to the code committee and ask the question, why the difference? Because I can't think of one.
Okay.
I think originally the recreational vehicle sales and rental was off-highway vehicles and not RVs and stuff like that.
Jerry?
Commission too, if you feel that there's something that you wanted, like, I mean, Commissioner Walton can certainly get clarification from the code committee. You also do have the ability to just say we want to changes so that they're the same, or we want to take this one out. Like, I mean, if you want clarification, that's fine. You're not obligated to go back to the code committee with your questions and things like that. You can just have the discussion and say.
I think that's an excellent point.
Here.
Thank you.
So from my standpoint, if you're asking, Commissioner Walton at this point, I really don't see an issue between a permitted use of recreational vehicle sales and rental and a conditional use of vehicle and equipment sale and rental. I'm open for conversation on that, but I really don't see how those two uses are very different. So much different that we would want to bring that as a conditional use.
Yeah, so I would say they should. Or vice versa. I would say they should both be in the same grouping, either permitted use or conditional use. I just don't know which one right now, because with a dealership, I mean, there are, you've got service station, not service station, but service bays and other things. So, but I'm willing to have that discussion. Well, I don't need a discussion.
Yeah, so. I think that goes back to the one city manager that said he had a Mercedes-Benz wanted to put a facility in the Stevens property. And we all kind of went, no, that's not what we're looking at. But for recreational vehicles, I think we were to redefine that as off-highway vehicles, ATVs, side-by-sides, snowmobiles, and that situation as recreational vehicles, and then vehicles being automotive type vehicles for a conditional use, and break them down that way between those two areas. And a lot of the discussions that we've had in the past basically divided it into those two separate issues.
Okay.
Another thing.
So I think we have those.
Oh, go ahead, Sherry.
Another thing to remember too is that just because something is a permitted use in a commercial zone, whether it's commercial recreation, traditional commercial highway, that doesn't exempt them from a site plan review. They don't just come in, get their business license, get their building permit and go. They still have to have a site plan that they bring to the city that we review for compliance with certain things.
So for me, again, it comes down to detrimental impacts to the surrounding community for both uses. And as written, I would say that I would have concern, well, shoot, I'm not sure if I can say this, that the lighting associated with, the sale of RV vehicles and normal vehicles would be a detrimental impact. But I'm not sure if right now we have a standard for approval based upon lighting impacts or light pollution. But definitely would want to have a better understanding to how to mitigate internal circulation, parking structures and facilities. And so my recommendation would be that those uses be a conditional use.
Okay. So Julie brought this, or sorry, Commissioner Loesch brought this up before, but does anybody have any concerns or questions about the A10 zone? We just kind of skipped over that, but just wanted to make sure that if anybody had some thoughts or comments, now's the time.
So I had one, and it's not so much about the actual removal of it. It's just the narrative that we have in the meetings about it. Sherry, and I'm sorry, I should have talked to you one-on-one before this, but any reference to the Department of Defense owning any easements as relation to aircraft, either noise or safety zones, the Air Force doesn't, or the DoD doesn't. All those easements are owned by the state of Utah. So that might be something that we want to change in the agenda is strike any reference to DoD having ownership in any of those properties.
Okay,
the state is the one.
I didn't know they were.
No, not a big deal.
Oh, okay.
No. Other than that, I'm good with it going away.
Okay. Well, I think we're at the point for a motion. The conversation seems to have died down, and Julie, if you wrote down what you said about 5 or 10 minutes ago, that would have been a perfect motion.
I didn't, but I'm going to try to remember.
Before we move on, I'm sorry.
So we can't recommend approval or recommend, sorry, let's see, recommend eliminating the A10 and then continuing the discussion on the 1?
Yes, you can do that. You can split the 2.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Boatwright.
I'm sorry, before we go there, there was one other land use that the code committee wanted us to look at.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we want to do that now.
Well, we've got about 15 minutes. We have to end this meeting at 8, I've been told by the city council, so.
Okay, so maybe we hold that conversation for later. We'll just wait until we re-attack on hotel.
Discussed. What was the other land use that you wanted discussed?
Sherry, I might get this wrong, but it was like warehousing and distribution centers.
Yeah. I think so.
So whether or not that is something that we want to see in our commercial highway zones.
Okay, I think that's something that can be included in the discussion that we're going to continue forward with for the City Code Article H, Commercial Highway Zone. So if we're moving that portion forward, I'm going to go ahead and just make a motion that we recommend for approval repealing South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article A, Agricultural and Aircraft Hazard Zone A10, and that we move forward the action item, or I guess the discussion on South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article H, Commercial Highway Zone CH, for further discussion of the various permitted and conditional uses within the zone, with staff input where appropriate. How's that?
I'll second that.
So I'm
Very
sorry.
good.
Sorry. One second. Can I have you clarify that a little bit, Julie? When you say move forward, not a recommendation to the city council at this point, but to have future conversation within the planning commission.
No, we're just gonna roll the agenda item forward for planning commission to continue the discussion on
So we're
the commercial
continuing.
highway zone, because there's more details that need to be worked through.
Just as a point of clarification for you, Commissioner Losi, when you do that,
Mhm.
the appropriate phrasing is motion to continue till the next
Motion
meeting.
to continue.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I know that's what you were intending, but like the proper terminology of it is continuing it, because that.
No,
pushes
that
it
works.
to The next agenda.
So we did
So
have
to
a
go back and
second.
just provide, I think we had a second from Wes. Do I need to provide any clarification on my motion?
Can
Because I
I
can.
make a suggestion? Sorry. I would suggest, just for the best clarification, to just separate the motion on each one. So do a
Okay.
motion, for, the A10, and then do a separate motion for your city code.
That's
Okay, I'm gonna try this again. Are we ready?
Go ahead.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve the recommendation for the removal or the repealing of South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article A, Agricultural Aircraft Zone, Hazard Zone, A10. Do I get a second?
Second.
Okay, and then I'm going to make a second motion to
No, Julie,
continue.
Commissioner Losi.
You
You
have
have
to
to
vote on
vote
that.
you have
Let's
to
have a
vote on
vote.
the first
Got to
one.
vote first.
Okay,
Oh, vote
so
Yeah.
repealing of the A10 zone as motioned by Commissioner Losi. Let's start with you, Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Who seconded it?
Wes, Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commis- Oh, okay, hold on here. I'm confused. Commissioner Davis. Yay or nay?
Aye.
Commissioner Losi.
Aye.
Commissioner Walton.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay,
Okay.
so we,
Then could I make the
Go ahead.
second motion? Okay, so I'm making the second motion to continue the discussion regarding amending South Weaver City Code 10-5-2, Article H, Commercial Highway Zone, to the next Planning Commission meeting.
do we have a
I'll
second?
second.
Commissioner Walton, thank you. All right, Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Losi.
Aye.
Commissioner Walton.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay. Well, moving on quickly, the Planning Commission bylaws. I know.
Gary,
Oh,
sorry.
yes, go ahead.
Seconded that. Who seconded the motion?
That
The
was
last
Wes.
I did.
That was
Or
Taylor.
Taylor. It was Taylor. Correct.
Kind of hard. Sometimes I can't recognize the voice, so I just want to make sure. And then also on that, the first motion that Losi made, is that a recommendation to the city council?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I think she just got her words inadvertently mixed up. It's a recommendation that they approve the repeal, not approving the recommendation to appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The planning commission bylaws, I think everybody's had an opportunity to review those and the comments on those. I was fine with the additions and the recommendations. I don't know if anybody else had any concerns on those.
I do.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Losi.
So, and this is kind of specific. I read through all of the kind of collating that I think Sherry did. I feel like there's trust issues within the community and obviously the Planning Commission, and in our bylaws, I think we need to have teeth. I think we need to show that we have a plan to address conflicts of interest. And I know the state has a certain, standard. I just think that we need to have teeth in our bylaws, since these are what we're going to be operating under, to address, potential removal if there was a conflict that was never disclosed, that was found out. I just think it needs to be spelled out. Another thing that I commented on was that no meetings with developers. I mean, let's spell it out. And then also in the bylaws, I really would like a time frame to be established in terms of if we're not getting the packets and the agenda items with sufficient times to review. And I understand things come up, things happen, people go on vacation, it's spring break, people get sick, like life happens. But I know that a lot of time was spent trying to get prepared for tonight's meeting and discussion. And I would like it in our bylaws where if an item hasn't been given sufficient time for presentation, and review, not only to the Planning Commission, but also to the public. I'm not even sure when the packet was uploaded to the city website for citizens to even be able to go in and review the packet. I think those agenda items need to be moved forward, so that we're not put in a position where we can't adequately discuss it. Because I do think it's unfair to the Planning Commission, to the citizens, and even to the City Council if, we haven't done our proper due diligence in terms of really vetting the information that's in front of us. So I'd like to see more teeth in our bylaws.
You do always have that option to continue an item. You're not obligated to discuss and act on anything. And in those limited cases where you are, it will be because a timeline has been invoked by some other state or city law, but those will be few and far between, and you'll be well advised in advance if you're obligated to act on something.
Okay.
Jamie, do we need to put more teeth in our bylaws regarding conflicts of interest? I mean, I think there's other ordinances and laws that, like removing a commissioner, that's already in code.
I'm not aware, there's a process for removing a commissioner. It's not related per se to an ethical conflict of interest, although that would certainly invoke that. The other consideration is that I don't believe the Planning Commission has the authority on its own to remove a commissioner. It would be limited to making a recommendation that a commissioner be removed.
The appointment and removal, I believe it's the city council and the mayor that does it, not the Planning Commission.
But Commissioner Losi, if you would like more in the bylaws about how to inform the commission of conflicts of interest and how to announce them and what those processes are, I see no reason not to do that. That seems appropriate to me.
Yep. I think we just need to show the public that we have a plan to address any of these potential issues and exactly what that process is.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Not that I
Any
want
other-
anybody on the planning getting removed. I'm just saying, let's show that we, full disclosure, right? We operate in the public eye, in public.
Any other comments or questions on that? On the bylaws?
No,
Well, it sounds like we're
Oh,
all
I'm
in agreement, except for that one spot. I mean, sorry, Commissioner Walton, I think we have delays here, but it sounds like all the other adjustments we are in agreement with, except for what if Commissioner Walton has something to say. But I agree with the addition of that Commissioner Losey is recommending that, and Jamie has recommended to add specific language in regards to conflicts of interest.
Okay. Commissioner Walton?
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just going through this document trying to find it. I just wanted some clarification on. Oh, sorry. I was trying to catch up to where Commissioner Losey was, and I lost my spot. So, but it was one of the items that you brought up, Commissioner Losey, and I just wanted to have a quick conversation on it. It had to do with talking to developers and property owners. And if somebody can help me
Yeah,
out with where that,
Not me. First.
yeah, do you know what part of the document that's in? I'm struggling to
It's
find
not.
it now.
It's not in there.
Oh.
And that's where I want more teeth, more definition. I think it needs to be in there. Is that,
Well, was
you
it
know,
one of the-
we meeting with developers, like as a planning commissioner. We shouldn't be. I mean, the only time we should be engaging in discussion is when a developer is bringing a fully vetted, fully reviewed plan that's gone through all of the checks and, you know, balances through staff, through engineering. That's when we should be talking to developers, not at any other point in time.
And that's already been made clear. I mean, do we need to spell that out in bylaws? Because that's just ethical. I mean, that
If
That
we
should be
can
understood.
pull out, we can pull out some of the things out of the Municipal Officers and Employees Ethics Act that address those concerns rather than just making reference to that section of state code. I can go in and pull out some of those specific things and put them in there.
okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my real question though is that's a really fine line to draw. You know, as I've been serving in this capacity, I'll have people, neighbors, you know, residents come and ask, hey, would you mind, you know, helping me understand the city code, or you know, would this ever fly? Does that cross a line? I don't know. And instead of putting it into the bylaws, I have reservation about having that written somewhere, only because it becomes a little hard to draw a line on what's appropriate and what's not. I think we all know that, you know, when a developer starts coming before us with with something that's on an agenda item for our next meeting, that's a line. But, you know, if somebody says, hey, I've got this piece of property, is that something that might be considered? I mean, obviously you'd refer them to city staff and our application process and everything else, but, and I apologize. I thought that was written into either the comments or the language of the bylaws to say that we shouldn't be doing that. But like I say, it was weirdly written, and if I'm not finding it as written into the bylaws now, I'm good to move forward.
Well, Taylor, are you being specific in terms of talking with a citizen about, you know, potential uses on their property? Or are you specifically referencing a developer? I'm being specific in saying a developer, that we're not meeting with developers outside of a meeting process.
So couldn't a property owner be a developer? And I think that's what I'm getting at, is where's that line? And I'd much rather not have it in there and just have it be part of our ethics training, that when you get approached by either a citizen or a developer about land use, that we channel it to staff so that they have the first inputs and not the commission.
So I'm gonna interrupt. It sounds like we need to have more discussion. So let's go ahead and move this on to the next item. Sherry, if you could take some of the comments that have been said just the last few minutes and maybe do some revisions on that. Let's go to comments from the Planning Commission. I'll just go quickly and say that next month's meeting, it sounded like we had consensus on meeting in person. So we will be back at City Hall next month. So yeah. Commissioner Johnson, anything?
Nothing on the Parks and Recreation Committee. Just for info purposes, tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, the Northern Utah Trails and our local TU chapter and staff will be meeting at the Angler Access Point to do some willow cuttings and transplants along the Weber River. So if anybody's interested, 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Walton.
Nothing further.
Commissioner Losey.
I don't have anything further.
Commissioner Davis.
Nothing further for me. Thank you.
Okay, well, if nothing further, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Or heck, I'll make a motion that we adjourn. How's that? I move we adjourn. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks,
Aye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Very
guys.
good.
Commissioner Losey, I'm almost done with those other questions that you asked me, so I'll get them to you as soon as possible.
Oh, thank you. I was actually going to email you and say like, hey, where are we at on this? So appreciate that.
No, some of them just took me a little bit longer to
They're
answer.
detailed.
So
Yeah, they're detailed. I understand.